The big story tonight. President Biden's announcement of his re-election bid that could be just 3 days away. This weekend, he's at Camp David, likely huddling about that announcement that many news outlets are reporting will happen on Tuesday. And that happens to be 4 years to the day that Biden got into the 2020 race. That announcement expected to come the same week that Hunter Biden's lawyers will meet with Department of Justice officials. One source telling Fox News it's not necessarily a signal that prosecutors are ready to charge Hunter, but the timing sure is interesting, especially now that the White House appears to be doing damage control over that testimony from the former CIA deputy director who told Congress, now Secretary of State Antony Blinken, quote, played a role in the inception of the letter signed by intel officials that described the Hunter Biden laptop story as disinformation. A White House spokesperson attacking Republicans on the Judiciary Committee, claiming the testimony was highly misleading and a selective leak. With all of the accusations about Hunter Biden and corruption within the Biden administration, the president himself says his presidency is actually pretty dull. Take a listen.
I'm putting on my sunglasses so I can see. All right. As I've told my distinguished friend from Massachusetts and good friend, Senator Markey, that it's really very, very dull when after all these years in public life you're known for two things, Ray-Ban sunglasses and chocolate chip ice cream. A very dull president.
Well, someone who could pose a problem for Biden in 2024 is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who just got into the race on the Democrat side. According to polling out this week, about 15% of Biden's 2020 voters say they would support Kennedy in 2024. In a new interview with Fox News, Kennedy says he's fundamentally different than Biden.
Right now, Neil, the polls show President Biden losing to Donald Trump, who is the presumptive nominee of the Republican Party. I'm in a better position to run against Donald Trump than any of the Democrats because I can hold him accountable for the worst thing that he did, which was the lockdowns. The lockdowns were absolutely catastrophic. I also just disagree with him on basic issues like my father did with Lyndon Johnson on censorship. I don't that the White House should be censoring its political, critics.
And the Wall Street Journal editorial board calling out, quote, Biden's second-term mistake. The op-ed reads in part, quote, it is impossible to know Mr. Biden's real physical and mental state because the White House goes to great lengths to hide it. But his decline is clear to anyone who isn't willfully blind. Different people age at different rates, but the risk of an accelerated decline for Mr. Biden is considerable. The chance that he could serve a full second term is hardly assured. Wow. Okay. Welcome, guys. Welcome, Kellyanne Conway. First time on the show. Good to have you. So much to talk about here. A lot going on in the run-up to the possible announcement from President Biden that he will be announcing his re-election campaign. His son, Hunter Biden, in the hot seat. Antony Blinken, his Secretary of State, in the hot seat. And we can't forget Merrick Garland, his Attorney General, is also in the hot seat over some congressional testimony he gave related to Hunter Biden. So a lot going on. And then we have this poll that I'd like to bring up. This is a Granite State poll, New Hampshire Survey Center. Let's bring up these numbers here. Okay, if we can bring up that poll, there it is. Okay, so there you see, 43% say they will definitely, probably vote for Biden again. 50% probably, definitely not. 8% don't know. Kellyanne, I want to go to you first on this poll because you are an expert pollster. What does this mean?
Well, let me just remind the viewers. First of all, thank you for having me on the big Saturday show.
Yes.
And thanks for not inviting me to the small Saturday show. This is a poll of New Hampshire voters. Why is this important? Because it's a state that Joe Biden carried, and it is a state where the sitting United States Senator just won by double digits. Kristen Sununu, of course, is the governor there. They shed 21 Republican seats in this last election in the state legislature. So the Democrats have some real momentum there. But Joe Biden does not. Among the Granite State voters, only 50% say he shouldn't run at all. That's even worse nationwide. Anita, up to about 34% of Democrats say that he should run for a second term. So all these people may be in the hot seat, but the polls are pretty cool to Joe Biden. RFK Jr. makes a very important point that Donald Trump is beating Joe Biden the head-to-head. Had you said that after the November elections, people would have said you were a Trump sycophant. It's a fact, and the other fact is that among independents, 83% say that Joe Biden should not run for a second term. He lost them after Afghanistan. He lost them because of inflation, because of rising crime, because of the border crisis, because of Ukraine, you name it. Independents have left Joe Biden. They're going to decide who the next president is, and they're not in for Biden. Last point, but I'm completely offended when he says that he's right, he's dull. But I'm completely offended that he thinks he's being known for sunglasses and chocolate chip ice cream. 52 years as the Loch Ness monster of the swamp. This guy was vice president for 8 years. You know how I know him? As the guy who withdrew from Afghanistan and left the Taliban in charge and 13 service members to death. I know him as the guy who's presided over record increases in crime, record increases in cost. So don't let him off the hook by allowing him to say that he's dull. He's incompetent, and we lack complete confidence in his stamina, his strength, and his vision for this country.
All right, welcome to the show.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Biden's spokesperson, Karine Jean-Pierre, doesn't want to talk about Donald Trump. She had this to say just this week. Let's listen.
Why have you been willing to talk about President Trump before? And were you in violation of the Hatch Act when you did so?
Absolutely not, because we're talking about what the president has done in the administration.
Not your president.
No, I know. I'm answering your question because I'm saying the President Trump. We were talking about what he did in the last administration. We were talking about policies that were harmful in the past administration. No. He asked me, does the president still believe that Donald Trump is a threat if he wins, right? Because he's a candidate. That's something different.
Donald Trump has been a candidate for re-election or for election or however you want to call it.
I understand
like
that.
A year, and you've talked about him a lot.
Yes,
and
about
what he's done a lot, so
as I talked about his policies when he was president. That's what I have talked about. That's what I've talked about.
All right. Well, she may not want to talk about him, but the person who used to have her job for former President Trump says President Trump should be out with the people. Let's take a look at some video of the former president. He was in Florida a few days ago, and here he is at a pizza joint, mixing it up with the crowd. And his former spokesperson, Kayleigh McEnany, says this is exactly what he should be doing. Listen to this.
The Biden strategy is to be presidential. They want Republicans to be chaotic, fighting personal insults, and they don't want to mention Trump, and they don't want to mention Republicans. She cannot mention him, but Trump behooves himself when he goes out and associates with the people.
Okay, Joey, what do you think? Trump mixing it up with people, is that where he's at his best?
Yeah, listen, there's an appetite for both of these strategies. It's not like one's doing something right and one's doing something wrong for themselves. It's when it comes down to the issues, where are people going to lean their vote towards? If there are any middle-of-the-road voters left, Trump definitely gets people like where I'm from excited, going out and hanging out with people, getting down on the redneck Riviera in Florida, or eating pizza with a bunch of folks. The people that I come from don't care about the trash they throw at Trump, the dirt they throw at Trump, because that's kind of baked in for them. But there are a lot of middle-class voters out there, educated white folks, women, who look at Trump and they're still a little iffy. And so for Biden, he got elected doing this kind of the statesman that's been around. But now he's the absent statesman. Now he's a statesman that's let our country literally, for a lot of people, go to ruin and our defense fall. And I don't think that works anymore. You have to show some fire that he doesn't have.
Yeah.
Is this going to be pizza versus ice cream? Is that the idea here?
I hope not, because I kind of fall on ice cream myself. That's not going to change my vote, though.
I almost want to dislike ice cream because Joe is pushing the chocolate chip so much. But I agree with you, Kellyanne. I think this I'm boring routine, it's all been marketing with the stupid glasses and the ice cream. He goes out for ice cream every time there's a scandal, and then he acts as if it's other people talking about the ice cream when it's just a marketing trick. I also don't like this thing of, he's really senile. He's not so senile that he can't ruin the country.
That's right.
I think Republicans make a mistake by underestimating him because he played that old Uncle Joe routine right into the White House. And people should stop falling for that.
Here. It hurt in 2022 also. Republican candidates should have made every Democrat on the ballot own and eat the entire Joe Biden and Democrat agenda. And ladies and gentlemen, the art of politics is to tell you what you can't see, not what you can. If you see a president in obvious mental and physical decline. So does the rest of the country. But remind them what they can't see, the things he doesn't want you to remember about his presidency. That's the key here. And I think that's why smart people in these polls are saying, I don't want Joe Biden.
Yeah, and speaking of the Democratic agenda, he's not a candidate yet, but Florida Governor Ron DeSantis was speaking to conservatives in Utah. Listen to what he had to say.
And as I look ahead to 2024, I believe the Democrats are able to sweep the offices again, win the presidency in both houses of Congress. They will seek to pack the U.S. Supreme Court, abolish the Electoral College, make Washington, D.C. a state, and eliminate voter ID in every jurisdiction in this country. That's an agenda where the left is trying to make the conservative part of the country second-class citizens. They don't want us to have an adequate voice in the affairs of our country. So in times like these, there is no substitute for victory.
Well, that's a long list of agenda items there that he says the Democrats will push through if Biden becomes president again. Anybody's reaction for what the country looks like with those elements in place? Joey.
Well, I'll tell you, for Ron DeSantis, I think the window's closing in a little bit on announcing. I think it's going to get old and tiring real quick, and the best he's doing is running for vice president. So I think we're going to hear something from him soon.
Kellyanne, Tommy?
DeSantis should have given that speech about November 20th, about 5 months ago, and I think they frittered away a great opportunity after he was riding high. That's right. He's got Donald Trump in his head. Trump is widening his lead in the primary polls. And look, DeSantis can still run. He's got a $100 million war chest. He's got the chance to go and make a big splash. But this laundry list of things, it sounds too much like Trump. The question is, how would you win the Trump voters away from Trump? And speaking of New Hampshire, in January, Anita and gentlemen, Ron DeSantis was beating Donald Trump by 20 points in New Hampshire. Now he's losing to him by 13. It's a 33-point swing in 3 short months just in New Hampshire.
Okay, yes or no, Tom, does DeSantis get in?
Oh, I think so, definitely. And I think we got plenty of time.
Yeah.
I disagree with most of these people. If I keep having this conversation, there is plenty of time. Plenty of time.
There is time. And we'll see what happens.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.